Welcome back everyone to another DSCC lab walkthrough. Today we'll be going over lab 1, deploying a 2-tier PKI. Our main tasks are to prepare our SUBCA for its role, install subordinate issuing CA, and configure IIS roles on our SUBCA. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Now the first thing we're going to do is set up our SUBCA with its basic configurations. Let's go ahead and enter my SUBCA. All I have is a deployed VM, nothing configured yet. So let's go ahead and change that. I'm going to change my IP settings first. This is 11mu. 11mu. Then if you have your alternate or any other DNS running, you can input that information here as well. I'm just going to leave my primary for now. And let's ensure that I can ping my domain controller. Alright, perfect. Now let's go ahead and turn off our firewall. Now if you're getting this error in the lab environment because of how the template was deployed, we're going to run a gpedit.msc and do this a different way. Let's go ahead and navigate to computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, Windows Defender Firewall, and then click on the Windows Defender Firewall option that you have. Then you can go ahead and click on Windows Defender Firewall Properties. Alright, and then you're going to change your domain profile, private profile, and public profile firewall state to off. Alright, so we took care of that now. Our firewall is off. If I refresh this, there it is. So now let's go ahead and change my hostname and add my SUBCA to the domain. Now before I go ahead and click OK, I'm going to navigate over to my domain controller and make sure that my SUBCA is pre-staged in its proper OU. Alright, so let's open up users and computers. Let's head over to our servers OU, 11mu servers, open that up. And let's pre-stage our SUBCA. New computer. And click on OK. Okay, so now let's go ahead back into our SUBCA and complete adding it to the domain. Alright, so now that we are added to the domain, log on as your domain admin so we can continue our configuration. Alright, so now the next thing we're going to want to do is copy our root CA, CRL, and certificate over to our sub CA. Now keep in mind that your root CA at this point should be offline. It is an offline root CA, so you won't be able to connect to it, through a shared drive or anything like that. So we're going to use this application called certificate.vft, which is essentially just a floppy disk drive that you can connect and disconnect from your virtual machines to transfer files over. So think of it kind of like a hard drive. Now, in order to do that, we need to add some VM hardware to our virtual machines in order to attach that certificate.vft. So let's see if our root CA already has one. It doesn't, and our sub CA should not have one either at this point. Alright, so now in order for us to be able to attach those certificate.vft files, we have to, or excuse me, in order to add that hardware, we need to power down our virtual machines. So let's power down my SUBCA and my root CA as well. Okay, so our SUBCA is shut down. So let's go ahead and add the hardware on it. Let's go to Edit Virtual Machine Settings. And here under the Hardware tab, we're going to select Add at the very bottom. Let's select floppy drive, add a floppy drive, and click on Finish. And we'll just leave this unconfigured for now. Click on OK. And then once you added that in there, you can go ahead and power your virtual machine back on. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for our root CA. And then on this one, we will configure it since it's the first one that we're going to be using the actual program on. So let's select this to local client and use floppy image file. Let's click on browse. Now I'm going to select the type of files to all files, and I'm going to look for the certificate.vft file. Now this should be in the student share drive, but if it isn't, just ask your instructor. And if it is, then go ahead and move it over to your desktop like I have it in there right now. So let's click on OK and power on our virtual machine. Alright, now let's get into our root CA. Alright, so now let's open up our File Explorer and navigate to this PC. Now you see that we have this floppy disk drive option that we didn't have there before because we've added that hardware to it. Now we also attached the program to it, so our floppy disk drive should be available right now. Now before we get to using it, I'm gonna right click on it and format just in case there's any saved files on there. We don't want them interfering with anything we have. Alright, this says there is no disk in drive A, so let's check that. Let's go to our settings. Alright, so it doesn't look like the configuration stuck, so let's do that again. Certificate.vfd, open, and OK. Let's try this again. I'm going to try format. Alright, now we'll leave all this the same. Volume label, it's not really important. I just have mine labeled as certificate. Let's click on start. Alright, format complete. I can close this out. Now if I open this, I can save files in here so I can transfer them over to my root CA, or excuse me, over to my sub CA from my root CA because my root CA is not online. Alright, so now let's navigate to where we have our CRL and our certificate on our root CA. So let's head over to our local disk, our C drive, and open this in a new window, and head over to Windows, System 32, Certificate Service, Cert Enroll, and then we have my certificate and my CRL. Now I'm going to change this name just to make it easier. I'm going to change this to 11mu root CA underscore cert. Now you can leave the name as default. It doesn't really matter, just as long as you're able to use it and you remember what it's for. Alright, so now let's go ahead and change this or copy it over to my floppy disk. Alright, so now we can disconnect this from our root CA so that we can connect it on our sub CA. So head over to VMware, removable devices, floppy drive, and disconnect. Now let's go over to our sub CA and connect this floppy drive the same way that we did on our sub CA. So let's head over to settings, floppy drive, make sure that it's connected, change your location to local client or wherever you have your certificate.vfd. Use floppy image file, all files, and I'm going to select the same one that I did earlier. So now let's log into my SUBCA. Alright, let's open up our File Explorer. Head over to this PC and open up your floppy disk drive. Yeah, now I have my certificate and my CRLs that I copied over from my root CA. Alright, so I'm in my sub CA. So now let's create a folder so that we can save these in there. Let's open up our C drive. And in my C drive, I'm going to create a folder named certain role. And I'm going to copy the certificate and CRL file into that folder. All right, so there they are. So now we can move on. All right, so now let's go ahead and publish our CRL and our certificate to Active Directory. So let's minimize this for now, and I'm gonna want to open up a Windows PowerShell as an administrator. All right, and I'm gonna type in this. Well, first let's change the directory to certain role. Now let's run a cert util command, ds publish, and this is going to be the path to our certificate. Let's type in, that's our CRL, this is our certificate. Space, root CA. All right, so press enter. All right, so the command completed successfully. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for our CRL. CRL, let's go ahead and press enter. Completed successfully. And now we'll run a add store command. So insert util. And then the name of our root CA file for our CRT. So 11mu root CA underscore cert dot CRT. And now the same thing for our CRL. Successfully. All right, so let's go ahead and minimize this one for now, or close it out. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is create a CA policy.inf file. So let's go ahead and open up a notepad on our SUBCA. And for this, there's some information that you have to type in from your lab data sheet. It's important that you copy it over and type it in exactly as it is. Otherwise, you might run into some issues with your policy file. Now, this is information I need to copy over from my environment, beginning with version, and all this information in there as well. The only thing you're not going to copy in there are these identifiers for each line, which is the letters, but everything else is going to be typed in exactly as it is, including these little brackets in the first one, which is the version. Jesus. Alright, so now we have all that information in there exactly as it is in our lab data sheet and exactly as it would be for the actual configuration, right? So now let's go ahead and save this file. Let's click on File and Save As. We're going to save this file to our Windows C drive. So, or C drive is in our Windows folder. And then within here is where we'll save it. So now you might run into some errors when it comes to saving directly to this folder. So if you do, what we're going to do is save it to our desktop and then move it over. So let's go ahead and attempt to save it in there first. Let's change this to all files. And the name is going to be CA policy.inf. That's important that you put that .inf and you have all files selected so it saves it as the proper file type. Otherwise, it'll just save it as a regular notepad document. So let's go ahead and save it now. Alright, so yeah, it's telling me I can't. So let's go ahead and save it on the desktop for now. I'll close this out. So this is how it should show up if you saved it correctly, as a little like blank white sheet of paper with the gear in the front. If you see a notepad icon, that means you didn't save it correctly. So now let's go ahead and open up our file explorer. Head over to your C drive and your Windows folder and then scroll down so that you don't save it in one of those folders accidentally, and drag your CA policy.inf file into the Windows folder. And there it is. Now, this will come into play a little bit later when we get to the actual configuration of our SUBCA. So now that we've done all the prep work, let's go ahead and install the ADCS role on our SUBCA. Alright, so let's begin. Let's go ahead and click on Add Roles and Features. And let's select Active Directory Certificate Services. Click on Add Features. And then no additional features needed so far. Ensure that you have certification authority selected. Now these are the roles that it can install on your actual initial configuration or installation. You can see we have a few more options such as web enrollment, web service, things like that. Now these are things that we might use, that we're going to use later on in the lab, but for now we're just going to use certification authority. Now even though you select them to be installed on this screen right here, that doesn't complete it, right? As we know, most things require a post-deployment configuration. Let's go ahead and restart if necessary and click on install. Alright, so our installation looks like it completed, so now let's go ahead and get started with the next part. So click on this little blue hyperlink that you get, Configure Active Directory Certificate Services on the destination server. Now for our credentials, we're going to want to leave that the same. Let's go ahead and click Next. Let's select the role that we want to configure, which is Certification Authority. Click on Next. Now this is going to be an Enterprise Certificate Authority. So let's go ahead and click on Next. And this is going to act as our subordinate CA. Then on specify the type of the private key, we're going to create a new private key. Leave your cryptography settings as default. And for common name for this CA, we're going to change this to just the host name of our sub CA. Just delete this extra information on the front and the back end, and just leave 11mu sub CA. that should change the path of your distinguished name. So it should look something like this. Click on next. And we're going to request a certificate from our parent CA. And we're going to do that by saving this request file. Click on next and click on configure. Alright, so it says configuration succeeded with warnings. The Active Directory Certificate Services installation is incomplete. To complete the installation, use the request file to obtain a certificate from the parent CA. Alright, so this is normal, alright, you should be seeing this error, and that's because, like it says right here, we need to obtain a certificate from the parent CA. Let's go ahead and close this out, close this installation progress window out as well, and let's open up File Explorer. Head over to this PC and your local disk C drive, and in there you should see this request file that we just created or generated during the installation and configuration of our SUBCA role. So now what we're going to do is we're going to copy this request file over to our root CA. So let's open up our floppy disk drive that we've been using earlier on, and let's copy this request file over into that floppy disk. And now, just like we did earlier, I'm going to disconnect this floppy disk from my SUBCA and then reconnect it back to my root CA. So disconnect it. Now I'm in my root CA. I'm going to connect my floppy disk drive back in there. Alright, and now I see that I have that request. Alright, so now let's go ahead and fulfill this request and process it. Okay, so let's move this request file over to the root of our C drive just for easier access to it. Alright, perfect. Now let's minimize these windows and open up our certification authority console. Alright, so now let's go ahead and right click on root CA, select all tasks, and submit new request. Then navigate over to that request file that we just copied over to our C drive. Local disk, there it is. Click on open. Now let's head over to our pending request folder. You see that we have this request in there that we just selected or imported. So let's right click on it, select all tasks, and select issue. Alright, now it gets taken away from this window, and now we head over to the issued certificates folder. So now we have to export this out so we can send it over to our SUBCA. So let's right click on it, select all tasks, or excuse me, click on open, and then head over to the details tab and select copy to file. Then you get prompted with the certificate export wizard. Go ahead and click on next on that welcome page and select our PKCS number 7 certificates file format. I'm going to leave this box unchecked and then click on next. Now the file name for this is going to be the path where you want to save it, followed by the name of the file. So let's go ahead and type in C drive, and let's name this 11 mu subca dot p7b, which is the file format. Click on next and then click on finish. Export was successful. Awesome. So let's go ahead and close all these things out. And let's open up our File Explorer again to our C drive, and then we see that certificate in there that we just exported. So now let's copy that back over to our floppy disk so we can send it over to our SUBCA. Alright, I have it in there, so now I can disconnect my floppy disk from my SUBCA. And reattach it to my SUBCA. Alright, and there it is. Alright, so I'm in my SUBCA and I can see my certificate. So now let's go ahead and install the certificate on our SUBCA. So let's go ahead and open up Certification Authority Console on this one. Now, before I get there, I'm going to copy the certificate over to the root of my C drive as well. Let's copy. And paste. Alright, back into our console, right? Let's go ahead. You can see that the service isn't started or anything because there is no certificate on it. So let's go ahead and right click on it. Head over to, let's see, all tasks. Then select submit new, or excuse me, install CA certificate. And navigate over to that file in your C drive. There's my certificate. I have it selected. Click on open. And give it a second. Alright, and then once it finishes doing that like little refresh, go ahead and start your service. I'm going to select my SUBCA, all tasks, and then start service. Alright, and now I have my certificate service started. Now, if I navigate over to my certificate templates folder, I should see 0 default templates. That's because when we created that CA policy, the INF file, we input the information for there to be 0 templates in here. So let's see. Okay, and just as expected, we see 0 templates in here. Now, if you do see some templates in here, that's because you didn't configure your file correctly or you made some type of error. So let's see. If I go to my Windows folder on my C drive and head over to my CA policy INF file, if you don't see this white paper with the little gear, that's probably one or the root cause of your error. Now, if you don't see this file in here at all, that could also be your error. Or if you do see it here and it has the correct little icon and saved correctly, if you open it, your load default templates should look something like this. So double check it for any spelling errors or maybe extra spaces or some type of character in there that you did not mean to input. Okay, so for task 3, we're going to install IIS role on our SUBCA. So let's head over to our server manager and select add roles and feature. Go ahead and click on next until you get to the server roles section. Alright, so now for our server role, we're going to look for web server IIS. Select add features. Click on next Click on next on the features page as well. And go ahead and complete the installation. Alright, so let's go ahead and click on close once your installation completes. Now let's verify that we install these services successfully. So let's go ahead and head over to our domain controller. We want to make sure that our web services are running. And in my domain controller, I'm going to open up Internet Explorer. And I'm going to attempt to log into or reach my SUBCA. So let's type in HTTP and then 11mu SUBCA. Now you should be presented with some type of screen like this. It is the default splash screen. So this lets us know that our web services are running on our SUBCA. So let's head over back to our SUBCA so we can do some follow-on configuration. Let's open up Tools, and we're going to head over to our web services. So Internet Information Services Manager. Now in here, I'm going to expand my SUBCA on my left-hand side. Then expand our sites. Right-click on Default Website and select Add Virtual Directory. Alright, so in this pop-up window under alias, we're going to type in certain role. And then for the physical path, we are going to type in C drive, Windows, System32, Certificate Service, and certain rule. And then click on Enter. Alright, now in the details box to the right, we're going to look for directory browsing and open this up. Now, you can see we can't change anything. That's because we have to head over to the right hand side and first enable it. Let's go ahead and do that. Now, once you have it enabled, check the box that says long date and click on apply. Alright, so now let's double check the work that we just did. We're going to go back to our SUBCA, or excuse me, our domain controller. In this path, we're going to type cert and role. Alright, and now we can view that certain role folder that we have on our SUBCA. So, for example, if I went to my SUBCA and went into that path that I typed in when I did my default website under Add Virtual Directory, let's see, in that path I put C drive, Windows, System32, Certificate Service, certain rule. This is the path that I put when I did my Add Virtual Directory. And these are the files that are in there. Now if I head over to my domain controller, you see the same 4 files that are in my SUBCA certain role folder. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So essentially what we just did is we mapped this folder to a web page. Now if I let's create a new file on our desktop. Test, and let's drag it over into this certain role folder. If I go over back to my domain controller where I have this web page open and I click refresh, I see that test.txt file that I just created. go ahead and delete that because it is not needed. It's just so we can see what we're doing. Alright, so now that we verified that, let's go ahead and move on. So let's head back to my SUBCA, and the next thing we're going to do is install the web enrollment on our SUBCA. So let's close this out and head over to our server manager. Let's go to manage, add roles and features, click on next, next. Now on this page where we have our roles, we're going to select this little drop down on Active Directory Certificate Services, and we are going to select Active Directory, or excuse me, Certificate Authority Web Enrollment, or Certification Authority Web Enrollment. Click on Add Features, click on Next, and go ahead and complete the installation. Alright, so the installation has completed. Let's go ahead and do the post configuration settings. So click on Configure Active Directory Certificate Services on the destination server hyperlink. Go ahead and leave your credentials as default. Click on Next and select Role Services to configure. Let's select Certification Authority Web Enrollment, which is the one that we just installed. Click on Next and click on Configure. Alright, and then configuration succeeded. So we have installed our Certification Authority Web Enrollment on our SUBCA.